I am pumped to share with you what I have been up to because I know it has been a minute. But today we're going to be diving deep into what I have been learning by being involved in the political world since my husband is running for state representative, and the super fascinating intersection between politics and inner work that I am currently obsessed with right now. Welcome to the Unweaving Chronic Pain podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Moore, founder of the Whole Self Integration Method, and I am here to take you from a life that is shrinking, whether it is due to chronic physical pain or chronic emotional pain, and to take you into an expansive, growing life that is full of passion, joy, and really is set up in a way that works for you. All right. Diving into today. I know it has been a while since I've recorded an episode or given an update. I've kind of been like non-existent on social media, and I wanted to fill everyone in on a little bit of why, but also what I have been discovering in the meantime, and I'm just super excited to share. So, as you probably know, because I've talked about it before, but my husband is currently running to be state representative here in Kentucky. Before this started, I didn't even know what a state representative was. It took me far too long to be like, wait, what are you running for again? Okay. And so this has been a completely new world for me. I've always not always, never mind. In the past 5 years or so, mainly because of my husband, I've kind of been a little bit more like sort of paid attention to politics, but I mean, I've never been like in the world and never understood it. And I'm like, I don't even understand why politicians have to raise money. Like, it was completely new to me. So I say this to be like, this has been a friggin' whirlwind. I had no idea what I was getting myself into or what he was getting us into, I should say. And it's been really fascinating. But because of this and because of reasons I'm going to talk about today, I really have taken a massive step back from my business. Obviously, if you haven't noticed, and the podcast was one of the things that just kind of fell off my list of priorities, to be honest, because it turned out that getting him elected has just been my number one priority. And I have still been having amazing transformations with my clients and seeing clients and things like that. And I'm working at a physical therapy clinic right now as well, part-time. So I have been keeping busy, but pretty much all of any free time that I have is now kind of dedicated to helping him in one way or another, whether it is knocking doors, which is what I'm going to talk about a lot because it's been fascinating talking to people, or just being the, homemaker and taking care of our 7-year-olds while my husband can go off and do whatever it is that he needs to do, which has been also a very different world for me because my husband's really, really supportive, and we've always had a very 50-50 relationship when it comes to doing home tasks and things like that. And he's normally the one who is, or we split it up, but it's like, normally every other night we're switching off who makes dinner. He normally is the one who makes breakfast. Let's be real. That one usually does not fall on me. He's the breakfast maker of the family. He's also usually the lunch maker for my child. It's kind of like he takes on a lot of those tasks that I do more of like some of the cleaning stuff that he hates. Whereas like, I don't like doing breakfast and lunch, right? Like it just like, it all works out. But now I've kind of done most of it. He still helps out. He still does make a lot of breakfasts, but he has gone a whole lot more. And while my child can tolerate some door knocking and some going out, I mean, at the end of the day, I just gotta, a lot of times be home with him, entertain him. And we also do part-time homeschool. So it's been a lot of fascinating and good stuff. So where I want to start was kind of the question that was a huge turnaround point for me, because getting into this, in the beginning, I mean, this started probably 18 months ago of him deciding he wants to run, maybe longer than that now. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. It feels like forever. But him deciding he wants to run and starting to go and like get involved in things and like go to meetings and like be out of the house a little bit more than I'm used to him being out of the house, because normally he works 4 hours? No, it's more than 4 hours, but he coaches 4 classes, something like that. I don't even know what he does. at a CrossFit gym. But then he has his own business where he does personal training for people, but it's on Excel on the computer, so he can do it from home. So anyways, point is he's home a lot. Like, he works from home. And so like him being out of the house is just like very different. But I would go to these events and people would be like, do you know what you're signing up for? Are you sure you want to do this? And I just like would always make the joke of like, he's not my dog. Like, I'm not in control of him. Like, if he wants to do it, he can do it. I don't care. Like, as long as it doesn't really affect me. And they're like, oh yeah, it's going to affect you. And I'm like, really? How much could it affect me? Oh, it does. Okay, got it now. And so in the past 6 months or so, and especially the past 2 months, things have just upticked dramatically because obviously the election is coming up here on November 5th because it is, the same, obviously, election as the national one, that he's on the ballot. And so, yeah, it's been really different. And so I've been doing a lot of reflection and realizing that if I had not been doing inner work up until this point, like, I don't know how I would have done this. Like, yeah, I don't even know how to begin to get into that. But I sometimes get glimpses of like kind of my old self and how I would have reacted. And it's so different now, just even in like little things, that happen. Or, he says like, okay, I'm just going to do knock 2 more doors and then I'm going to be home. And then he's not home for another 45 minutes. And I'm like, the hell were you doing? It's like, oh, I got in a really long conversation. And like my ability to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Versus being like, how dare you is, completely different now than it would have been. I could see where people literally would get divorced over this and where it's been. But honestly, we've been like really good and chill. Obviously, I've not had nearly as much time to just be with him as I would like. And all of our time together is pretty much talking about politics and the race. But like, it's fine. It's fine. I think it helps knowing there is a November 5th. This massive chaoticness ends. And obviously, if he gets elected, our lives will change quite a bit. But that's fine. We'll figure that piece out then. But like the absolute chaos will be at least over, and the complete uncertainty and unknown of like what's gonna happen will at least be done, because at the end of the day we have absolutely no idea. I mean, things are looking good for him, but there's no way to know. We live in a very purple district. He is running as a Democrat, and I think it's like 51 or 52% Republican. So if people vote straight ticket, Republican wins, right? But we don't think people will vote straight ticket. And that's kind of our goal here. But what changed this all for me? And I was feeling myself maybe about a month or 2 ago, a little like, okay, this is getting really hard. I could feel a little resentment setting in just from me really not having time to do things that I wanted to do, like in my business, and just realizing I hadn't shown up on this podcast. And, even when I was having free time, I'd just been like, so I think just drained from everything that I just was not feeling motivated to do things like this. And I could feel myself getting resentful of him. That's where I'm going with that. And then this question popped into my head while I was on a walk. And the question was, and I posted this on my reels if you ever look at my Instagram, which has been also very sparse recently. Sorry about that. It was, if I had all the time and the money in the world, would I do this thing? And it was actually it had nothing to do with my husband, the question. It had to do with something else. And I was shocked at the answer. And when the question first came in, I didn't even want to ask it about this particular thing that I was like struggling whether to say yes or no to, because I have historically hated the question of, if you had $1 million, what would you do? Because I'm like, I don't know what I would do. I don't have $1 million, and I would probably just like lay on a beach and do nothing. So if I had $1 million, I would be like a lazy ass bum that wouldn't do anything, because why would I do anything? Right? Which is probably pretty telling that, still recovering from some burnout over here. But so anyway, so that question came in. I'm like, ugh, I hate questions like that. But I was like, it just kept kind of poking me. So I decided to ask it. And I was so surprised by my body's like instant reaction to this thing. It was like, yes, I would do it. I was like, really? I would do this thing? It's weird. So I started trying it out with other things, and eventually got to the question of, if I had all the time and money in the world, how would I support Adam, my husband? And it was like this instant like flood of, I would just do everything. Like, I would be cooking all the meals. I would be cleaning. I wouldn't do really any outside work. I would just kind of drop everything and like be full on supporting him. And if you know me, that's not my style. I was never meant to be stay-at-home wife, type thing. I don't particularly love doing homemaker. I don't mind it. Actually, I don't mind it. I shouldn't say I don't hate it or anything like that. Like, I do enjoy cooking and cleaning and stuff when I have time, but like that is not what I usually choose to do with my free time. Yeah. And so I was like, really? And so I was just really sitting with that of, yeah, I really would. Like, and actually felt really, really good. And up until that point, I had just been having this constant conflict on a daily basis of, I should be doing more in my business. I should be getting more clients. I want to help more people, And it just felt so strained. And when I asked myself that question, it's just like, I was able to let go of all of it and be like, it's okay to step back, and gave myself full permission to not make a podcast episode until today. I was obviously feeling inspired. And, from a financial standpoint, we are not equipped or not in a financial state for me to completely stop working, unfortunately, because otherwise I really would. I'm working part-time in a clinic. I think I would be like, I'm just taking leave until the election, and just maybe even told my clients, like, just, we're going to put everything on pause. But like, I do love what I do, and I do love seeing my clients, but it obviously takes time and energy. But we're not in a place financially for me to be able to do that. So obviously I am still working and seeing clients and everything like that. But it just allowed me to clear the air of anything extra and be like, I can do it afterwards. I can do it after the election. I just want to support him and get him elected. And it's been interesting because in some of the circles I've hung out with, where I've made friends and have like group chats and stuff like that, it's been a really interesting point of contention. And honestly, I've really stopped. Well, it's kind of been happening for more than just the past 2 months now. Kind of had not falling out, like nothing dramatic or anything like that, because I try to stay out of that. But kind of some weird points of contention with people who really have disagreed and have judged what I'm doing, and judged me stepping back, and feel it's very patriarchal and very anti-feminist, and, are like, how could you give this up? And it's like, one, I'm not giving up my business. Like, I literally still have a business, and I'm still seeing clients, and I'm doing what I am doing. But even if I did, it's my choice. And isn't that what feminism is all about? That women get to choose what they want to do? Is that not the point? Because I thought it was. And that we're not supposed to judge, really, women for their choices that are truly driven by their authentic wisdom. And I think people have a really hard time, and I think part of this is people have a really hard time with politics, which I do too. There's obviously a shit ton of negative opinions on politics, and I hold them all as well. And so I think that's part of why there's been so much turmoil, as people are like, you're going to get behind him and joining this very patriarchal thing. And where I have gone to with a lot of these people and trying to have conversations with them about this, and have been mainly unsuccessful because I have not put in the effort to this, because I don't frankly feel like I have the time or the energy to do this. But one I did want to talk about it here is that I don't think we realize here in America, or chances are wherever you're listening from, whether it's Canada or Australia or Europe, of how fucking lucky and free we are. Look, there's a lot wrong in any one of these countries that I just named, and a lot that can and should be improved on, which is part of why my husband is running, or is why my husband is running, not part of it, but it's literally the reason. But we also have to realize the insane foundation that we have, and how unusual and how much of an anomaly it is to the rest of the world. And unless we realize that, I think it's really hard to see why politics is so important, and just getting out and voting and doing your research is so important, and not doing it from this really fear-based state. So I'm going to come back to the whole like how lucky we are thing in a minute here. But I first want to talk about where I see inner work playing into things so much, or lack of inner work, I guess you should say. So, and where it drives so many decisions, and where it gets us into so much, it gets us to where we are today. It gets us to the divisiveness of where we are today. And I'm not going to bring in the fact that, like, I do think, well, it all plays together. You can't separate it out. But, like, the media and every content is, you know, clickbait and fear-based, and it gets more clicks and all that crap. Obviously, that all plays into it. Each plays into it, but we don't have control over that. I cannot control what CNN or Fox News or anybody is deciding to post as their headlines. But instead, I can control my reaction to a headline and choose not to click on it when it's fear-based. And that's something, so to me, that's where I have my control. It's not that I'm not angry about CNN and Fox or literally every fucking media company and social media and influencers and everyone on freaking Instagram that, not everyone, you guys know what I mean. Who use content solely to get likes and attention, and that has led to a real screwed up place. Like, that's a whole different podcast. I'm just gonna like put that aside. It exists. I'm aware of it. What we can control is our reactions to it. And at the doors, and by at the doors, because I didn't even know, like, I'm saying door knocking. Like, I didn't know what people meant by freaking door knocking because I'm new to politics. And so that's literally like, you know, showing up with my husband's like flyer or brochure, whatever thing at the door and being like, hey, you know, my husband's running to be the next state representative of this district. And, you know, we just have a really nice conversation about what are issues you care about. And, you know, making sure they get out and vote, answering any questions, or just, you know, leaving it at their door if they don't answer, obviously. But anyways, in these conversations I've been having with people, it's been fascinating to see people's decision-making and questions and biases and things like that. And for one, I first just want to say the vast majority of people are so nice. And most people, it's a very boring conversation. Often it's a like, thanks, I'll look at it. I don't really want to talk to you and share my personal issues with you, so bye. Right? You know, I take the hint. Like, they're not really... Some people are they're very challenging to engage. It's clear they don't want to engage. I leave them alone. I hand it and just be like, hey, just do your research. Okay, bye. Right? It's just like a conversation like that. I will also say in there, I always wear my Star of David necklace. Because I just literally keep that on every single day, and have not had a single negative comment about it. In fact, I have had many positive comments about it. I've gotten multiple hugs because of it. And yeah, so the point is vast majority of people are very like normal and nice, or just like don't really want to talk to a stranger about politics. I think they're a little bit more willing to talk to my husband because he is the candidate itself, because I think he tends to have like a little bit more conversations. Anyways, just wanted to put that aside to be like, it's not like every conversation some crazy conversation, but the people who are willing to engage is really, really fascinating. And there's been some patterns that I've seen, and most are that their decision is very fear-based. It's like an uninformed, fear-based, like quick reaction based off of like one thing. Whether that's pro or against my husband, like it's just kind of irregardless, like not even going into issues or anything like that. And the thing is the more we operate from this shrink state, which I've talked about before on the podcast, the state where we are stuck in like spiraling thoughts, where we're resistant to learning more, where we're kind of really closed off, where we even just get often in that state, we also think that we know it all. And when we're in that state and making a decision out of it, it often isn't going to be one that is aligned with what our wisdom-guided action would have been. It could be. they're not completely incompatible, right? You could make a fear-based choice to run from a bear, and your wisdom would also be like, run from the bear, right? They can go together, but often they're not. And what I've seen from a lot of people is they're not. And so we really need to know how to shift into a grow state, which if you've listened to my podcast before, if you've taken my course, this used to be called the power state. I have updated it recently and to the grow state. So the grow state, without going in depth into exactly what it is just a place of expansiveness and openness. We're going to leave it at that for right now, where we are taking wisdom, guided, aligned action. And so I want to invite you to make sure that as you are making the choice for whomever candidate you want to vote for, when you are looking at your local elections, because please, please, please do, it is so important, that it is from a state of grow and not shrink, from a state of wisdom and not fear. Because what's happened, so there's like so much black and white thinking that happens when we are in shrink. And so I'm going to give an example of a conversation that mimics so many other conversations I had. It just happened yesterday. There was a woman that I was talking to, so sweet. And she's like, look, like I've actually looked into both candidates and I just really disagree with your husband on this one thing. And what this one thing is, and I'm not going to go into like what it is, but the point is it's also an amendment to the Constitution. So it's a separate thing you can vote on. Like you can vote yes or no to amend this piece of the Constitution. And my husband wants to vote no for it, and she wants to vote yes for it. But the point is that she can vote yes for it and also vote for my husband. So it's just like this one piece. And she's like, otherwise, I feel like he's got so much common sense. Like, I really like everything he stands for. She's also met him before. I really like him. But like, I just cannot get behind him on this. And so as I'm talking to her, and we were having a really good conversation about the amendment itself, because honestly, I feel like it's a little bit of a confusing amendment. But anyways, like there's some place to have a lot of really interesting conversation. So we were going there. And at the end, I was kind of like, okay, have you looked at what his opponent stands for? And she was like, no. I was like, really? So you don't agree with my husband on this one thing, but you don't know what his opponent stands for. And she was like, no. And so I told her some of the things. She's like, I don't agree with like basically any of those things, other than the fact that his opponent's a Republican. But she doesn't agree with pretty much any of his issues. And she was just like, okay, like she was a little more open. And so at the end, I was like, well, can he count on your vote? And she's like, I don't know yet. I was just like, okay, it's fine. Like, I'm not going to sit there and push people. Like, I mean, one, they can just lie to my face. But you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, whatever. Just think about it. Like, really make sure you're also looking at what the other guy stands for, not just the fact that you disagree with my husband on one thing. And it goes to show where, like, often our line of logic from a fear-based state, which is what hers is from, it's so irrational. And I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. Like, we literally all do this. But what so many people do is they hear one thing about a candidate that they don't agree with, and then they go like, well, fuck them, and they toss them out, and they will vote for the other person without knowing anything about them. Or maybe they like even learn some things, and it's still not enough to override the initial no, which is what they kind of like heard first. It's so hard to change that initial gut reaction off of something. And logically, it makes absolutely no sense. And I've run into this quite a few times at the doors now where people, and mainly it is a Republican-Democrat issue. Like there is that one extra piece that is thrown into it. But I think it very much ties into it as somebody who's traditionally voted Republican, even though this Republican candidate who my husband is up against, whose name is Thomas Jefferson, which is hilarious. My husband is Adam Moore, doesn't actually stand what they stand for. And even though my husband is actually more aligned with their value because he's a very centrist and is very conservative with some of his values, just very liberally, like, very pro human rights and common sense, they won't vote because it feels so wrong for them to vote Democrat. And part of the huge reason is because they cannot separate my husband and on the local level from the chaos of national politics. And I think this is true for so many of us. And this is where I want to just bring attention because like where you are, the Republican candidate might be the better choice, or the Democratic candidate might be the better choice. I don't know. It really depends. Like, I've never voted straight ticket. But we cannot, like, most of us are going to kind of, quote unquote, choose a side. Okay, like, let's be real. That's what humans do. And so you have a party that you probably are favoring, or you're like, maybe you're like me, where you're like, kind of just despise both parties, but there's one where you're like, I guess, like, I'm going to begrudgingly vote for them. Right? It's a favored one, even if you don't like them. That's where I am in politics right now. Because at the national level, it's freaking insane and everyone's gone fucking crazy, okay? For lack of any type of PC way to say it. But it doesn't mean there's actually some really sane, high-quality candidates that exist within that. Because the reality is, in our political world, like, you can't run as an independent and run. Like, the woman yesterday, she's like, why wouldn't your husband just run as an independent? Like, because he can't win that way. Like, it's pointless. It's a waste of time and money and effort. That's why. Like, he just had to choose. And he chose through his conscience, and he chose based on politics here in Kentucky, not at a national level. And that's what he chose. That's what he chose. That's what helps him sleep at night, and that's what matters. And I fully support his decision. And even though there are things at a national level, or there are many far extreme left-wingers that I really, really don't agree with, but I agree with my husband. And I agree with what he stands for. And he's not those people. And people, like, at the doors cannot, or some people cannot separate that out. It is fascinating. And so the point is do your research. Don't let some, like, this one piece bias you and just go for the other person without also really sitting down and doing your research. Which, by the way, can be whard to do. Like, I know that candidate my husband's running against has very little about him. He has denied doing any debates. Whatever. He just said no to all the offers of debate, even one on, like, the local Fox News station. He won't debate my husband. He refuses because I kind of think he's a coward. Hopefully I'm allowed to say that, whatever. It's my podcast, right? But I was like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, it's a great publicity. If you stand by what you believe in, why would you not want to share it with as many people as possible? He doesn't have an issues page on his website. Like, it can be really hard to do your research, but to me, that is part of my research. If a candidate is hiding their issues and is hiding in general and isn't showing up and doing interviews and isn't answering questions, I don't know. That tells me all I need to know about them. Like, I don't know how to vote for somebody unless the other person, like, a fucking crazy person, right, or had way worse views that were written down. Like, I don't know how I would vote for someone who won't show up and share their views. And it's literally the point of being a politician. But where I'm going with this is that we just have these big cognitive distortions that happen. And this matters. It matters for so many things in our life. And obviously I'm focusing on politics here, but it matters on a political level as well. Because when we do things like this, we sit here and we wonder, we're like, how did we get to where we are today? How are these people voted into office? And it's because people voted for them. Either because they did fear-based voting, or here's the next really important piece. And I talked about this on a couple episodes ago. I mean, probably a while ago, back in like May, when the primary happened here. The extreme right winger that my husband is running against got elected because only like 10% or 13%, I can't remember, of people showed up and voted. That's why he's the candidate, because people didn't vote. People didn't pay attention. And look, like, I'm not judging you if you're someone who hasn't, because, like, I also have not historically paid attention. I have always voted, I will say that. But I am not someone who always historically paid attention, or I definitely never took, I just said sorry to my microphone in case you were wondering, because I hit it, because I can't not talk with my hands. I really didn't pay much attention to local politics. I never really took it seriously. So there's no judgment if you haven't either and haven't realized how important it is, because I didn't until I was in this. I only paid really attention to national politics, and the day of would glance over, the local people's profiles. But it was only in the last couple years that I started seriously understanding how important it is. And more importantly, this is how people get voted in. because a lot of them will get voted in at a local level. And now they have the experience. Now they have the name recognition. So it's much easier for them to get then voted in on a bigger level. People don't do their research. People don't get out and vote. But the people who do vote are the extremists. And so there's nothing that drives me now more bonkers than people who are like, there's just no point in voting. Or I just don't believe in the system. I don't think I can make a difference. It's like, yeah, that's literally, you are making a difference by not voting. You're making it so the extremists can get it easier. And then wondering why we are in the state we are today. And it's this vicious cycle because now you also still won't vote because now things are only getting worse. And I hope this puts a little fire under your butt if you haven't traditionally voted or you have fallen into that apathy state. Because I have just seen this, my husband's race firsthand has been like such a highlight of that. And I talked more about that again in like I think an episode in May, so I won't harp on that again. But this is where I left. Honestly, I really had to leave so many like spiritual circles or even like business coaching circles where they're like, we're just above voting and like above politics because it's just so low vibe. Well, yeah, okay, that's great. Politics affects you, honey. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. Like, politics and where they are today and the freedoms we have today are why you have the luxury of being like, meh, I'm fine. Or, you know, why you have the luxury of being able to come and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about or make whatever choices it is that you want to talk about. And somebody has to do it. Somebody has to show up and represent the people in and hopefully an honorable way. And if no one honorable is willing to show up, then we get megalomaniacs. We get people who just want to be in power and want that power trip. And so this is where, kind of going back to where I had some falling out with people, is if I'm not willing to support my husband in this and I said no, and I wanted to be selfish about it and be like, no, like that's going to affect my life. That's going to affect my business. And I don't want you doing that. Well, guess what? Then that means Thomas Jefferson wins. And we get this person in politics who wants to take away women's rights and wants more guns on the street. It makes my life unsafe. Makes my son unsafe. So ultimately, it's actually an extremely selfish decision that I'm making to go all in and support my husband because I want a safe world. I want a world where I can continue to choose what I want to do. I do want to continue to live in a world where people can be like, man, I'm too good for politics. Even though I don't despise it, I want you to have that freedom. I want you to live in a world that we're so fucking free that you don't even realize how important it is and how much work goes into it. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's like so cool. The problem is when it gets out of hand and too many people go apathetic, then we start to lose it, which is what's happening now. And this is where we have to realize that between 2008 and 2019, that there was a loss of freedom for 83% of the world's population. Only 17% gained freedoms. 83% of the world lost freedoms between 2008 and 2019. It's the whole world. Freedoms are not a given. Freedoms aren't passive. It's not like just because we have them now that we can't lose them. We are so lucky to have them. Less than 20% of the world has freedom. Has the freedom to say what they want, to do what they want, to make the choices to not care. We literally do have first world problems here, and I love it. I want to keep having all of the first world problems. I want the privilege of having first world problems. I would like to retain that privilege. Privilege is good. Privilege is fantastic. Privilege is not a bad word. We do have a lot of first world problems that we absolutely need to improve upon. There are so many things that we here in the United States need to improve upon to get more freedoms, to have more equality and all of that good stuff. And it's a privilege to be able to fight for that and to have that ability to keep wanting to grow and expand and make things better. But we have got to realize the amazingness of the foundation that we stand on. We cannot throw it away for something worse. It's like exactly like the voter who was like, I don't want to vote for your husband because of that one thing. And she was willing to vote for someone worse, even though she separately could vote for that thing, ironically. But what is happening, right, at some of the top universities in our country is there are literally kids, college students, wanting to dismantle democracy and the freedoms we have in favor of Sharia law for the benefit of, like, what the Islamic State wants. They want an Islamic caliphate. Well, I don't know if they want it. I don't know if they know that they want it or if they realize that that's what they're calling for, but it is. It's literally the propaganda that they're being fed is from that. And I think that's the scariest part, is their willingness to throw away something that isn't working perfectly. Again, see the theme, perfectionism here, for anything, even if it's far worse. When we aim for perfectionism, we often end up worse. Things are never going to be completely perfect. But we've got to realize that some things can just continue to grow and expand on, and we keep making it better. We don't throw the whole thing away. Look, the reality is, if you know the history of Iran, Afghanistan, and many of those countries, they used to be societies where women had rights. Not perfect rights at all, but they had rights and freedoms. They were growing and expanding, and they can be lost literally overnight. Let's look at Iran, at what happened. It was far from perfect before 1979, but women had rights. Go look at, if you haven't seen them, go look at the pictures of Iran before the 1979 revolution. Women are dressed in whatever they want to wear. They are vibrant. They are colorful. They are out on the streets. They are mixing with men. And now they lost it all. And that revolution happened because people thought things weren't good enough. And they voted for somebody, or they overthrew the government for something far, far worse. And if you talk to people who were involved in the revolution, most of them regret it. It's a fucking bad idea. Women lost their rights. It is now mandatory in Iran to wear the hijab. Even a strand of hair showing on the street can result in a woman being beaten and arrested. Like, in public. Schools are segregated by gender. Women are taught arts and humanities. Boys get to learn the math and science and technology. They don't get to go to school together. They cannot mix together. Men are legally allowed to withhold money from their wives if their wives aren't, performing their marital duties, meaning sex, or just household duties. Then the husbands get to control them, get to not give them, whatever pay they're supposed to be earning for being their wife. The man's in charge of where his wife can go, of if she can work, of where she gets to work. Women are literally banned from singing. Like, you cannot sing in Iran. You sing on the street, you can get beaten and arrested. Why? Because women's voices are erotic. And I mean, it's not just women, too. There are singers or artists who want to express, are routinely jailed, murdered, executed. Like, I don't know that people are aware that these things happen. It's so important that we understand how much freedom we have here. And when we don't understand how quickly things can change, we risk losing it. And I just want to say, because I just went on a whole thing about Iran, the people of Iran are not for this. The people of Iran, this is the Islamic Republic of Iran that is enforcing and making these rules. The people of Iran do not want this. They're very pro-freedom, pro-democracy, pro-Western values, and are currently held under this oppressive regime. I was lucky to be raised with my parents' stories where they grew up under communism. They grew up standing in line for food for hours and hours on end. They grew up knowing what it's like to have your phone bugged, to have KGB raids on your apartment, where people, fall out of windows somehow a lot, aka they get murdered by the government, where people just disappear. I grew up with the stories of my grandparents whose entire families were murdered in Auschwitz and concentration camps. Sure, you know by now that my grandma was an Auschwitz survivor. My grandpa escaped from a concentration camp, both of whom have a whole horrific stories and experiences. They understood, and my parents included, what it's like to have freedom. And so I do think I was very lucky to have that instilled in me very dramatically from a very young age, to not take it for granted. I do believe we are at a turning point where if people don't realize how good we have it, even if there's still tons to improve on. We can have something be really fucking good and still want to make it better. That we risk losing so much more. Every time I take someone through my drop-down practice, which is all about finding safety, I revel. Like, I feel it so deeply of how lucky I am with that person to really feel into that physical, literal safety that we have. Recently, though, I've had some clients who they don't have that anymore. They're in Israel, or they are Jewish in communities here in the United States where it is no longer safe to walk out in the street and be Jewish. That physical safety actually has been lost. I still fully believe and have worked with them on finding nervous system safety. To me, that concept never goes away no matter where you're under or where you live, but it's much harder. It is, in reality, much harder to find, but it is possible when there isn't physical safety, when you actually don't know. I think it's even more important to touch into nervous system safety when there's that uncertainty and there is that lack of safety. The concept doesn't go away. It becomes even more important. But personally, I'm a big fan of being able to literally feel into it. But maintaining that requires us to first realize that it exists and that it is not to be taken for granted. And number two, it requires one other thing that I really want to touch on that has come up at the doors a lot. Is that what's so interesting, and this has been, again, just because my husband's running as a Democrat, I have seen this as a pattern in many Republicans who, and it's not, I'm sure if like my husband was running at a Republican, it would be flipped. I think this exists on both sides. It just makes sense that it comes up for those who are on the Republican side for why I'm door knocking. And the conversation will go something like this, of like, I could never vote for a Democrat, right? Like that one woman who agrees with my husband on everything, but may not choose not to vote for him just because he's a Democrat. And when I ask why, and they say all these things, okay, which are like, to be fair, I do think are true of some Democrats, because Democrats are a wide range of people. We're not going to go into it. But are obviously not all Democrats. Just like, we would never be like, well, there's that one white person who, believes in the fucking KKK. It's not like all white people do. Like, right? So anyways, the conversation will be like, well, I can never vote for him because of X, Y, Z of these things that Democrats do. And I'm like, well, he doesn't stand for any of those things. What do you stand for? What do you want to see in someone? And they're going to say honesty, accountability, integrity, somebody who wants to work with both sides, someone who doesn't want to, create more division. They'll say all these like really beautiful things. And I'm like, that's great. That's literally everything my husband stands for. Yeah, but he's a Democrat. And Democrats are great. And I'm like, but he's not. And in fact, his opponent is incredibly divisive and like is very, very divisive, is not somebody who wants to work across the aisle. And is, from personal stories I have heard, I cannot completely say, for sure, because these are all hearsay, is not an honest person and is not someone with integrity. Anyways, we won't go there. But, doesn't stand for any of those things. So why wouldn't you vote for the candidate who literally is what you stand for and the other candidate isn't? And then they just will go back to like, well, but Democrats, you know what I mean? But like, and it's like they can't focus down at the one thing in front of them. Or like this one person in front of them. Like, I'm like, I don't care who you vote at the top of the ticket. I mean, I do, but like, right? It's like, I'm not gonna, that's not what I'm here knocking on your door for. Like, vote for whoever you want at the top of the ticket. I'm asking you to vote for my husband, who literally stands for everything you want. And it's so fascinating because people like cannot wrap their heads around the fact that it is possible that something exists, which is what they want, and then they reject it. And I think this happens, again, at personal levels, too, where someone will be presented with this opportunity that's everything they want. And they're like, well, no, that makes no sense. It's not possible to actually have this thing I want. And they reject it. They push it away. I just think our brains sometimes just get broken because we have so many biases and it goes against so many beliefs we already have. And this is where the inner work is so crucial. Sorry, now my cat has joined us, so sorry if you're hearing weird purrs and meows and bells, but we're just gonna keep going with it. Okay. Forgot to close my door. And so this is where it is so important to be examining where things don't add up, where we say we want one thing and then we reject the very thing we want, right? It's like the person who wants love or who wants to be complimented or recognized, and then when they get those things, they're like, oh God, this feels terrible. No, get rid of it. And like, I'm totally that person. And what it's required is being like, oh, that's so fascinating, right? Here, I've just been presented with this thing that I want, and then I'm rejecting it. What is it in my nervous system that is not okay with that? That doesn't feel safe with that doesn't believe it, right? It can be so many different things. And this is where, in my whole self-integration method, step 3 is this introspective inventory step, which is so crucial because when we have the ability to pause and just notice, just start by noticing the contradiction, the paradox of like, whoa, this is really fascinating. Here I am wanting to be complimented, but yet someone complimented and I just like tossed it aside and scoffed it off and just was like, no, I do look ugly today, or, whatever. Like, what is that about? Because when we go there and when we work with whatever it is, whether it's something deep in our subconscious, whether it's actually a conscious thought, whatever belief, whatever it might be, and we can shift it, all of a sudden we can get aligned. We can line our parts up so what we really do want and what we say we want and truly do like wisdom guided want is actually possible for us, and we don't just reject it. And so many people say they want people in politics to be more accountable, to be more honest, to, be more for the common person. But yet when they are presented with somebody who is willing to do all of that, they reject them, they deny them, they refuse to believe it's possible, they won't give them the benefit of the doubt, things like that. And it's like, well, then how are we ever going to get there where we do have more honest people in politics if we're never going to vote for them, or we're never going to support them, or even going to kind of some of this, like people in these like spiritual and business, like women's business spaces, if like, you have someone like a husband of one of these people, or that woman herself wants to run and she's kind of like brought down, then we're never going to get it. We're never going to have that opportunity to bring more sanity back into politics if we don't allow it to happen. So what is it in us that rejects that? And it's just something to play with. Anyways, I will let you all go now. Thank you for listening into this. Please do your research and get out and vote. And if you are interested in supporting my husband in any way, we still are trying to get out digital ads, TV ads to just get his name out because he is competing against someone with a lot of name recognition. And I'm very worried people won't do their research and they're going to be like, Thomas Jefferson. He sounds like a good dude. I know that name. So we need name recognition here. Feel free to support my husband. Any amount helps. It adds up. He's run a very, very grassroots campaign. And his website is Kentucky Deserves More. That is KY Deserves MOORE, because our last name is MOORE. Or you can just like literally type in Adam Moore Kentucky in Google and it'll come up. And please feel free to donate. It really, really helps. I will add one more thing at this. I said at the beginning, I don't understand why people need to raise so much money. Like, why do you need $100,000 to run a campaign? Like, what are you possibly doing? And it's it's running ads, it's sending out mailers. It's so expensive to mail out, pieces of mail. I think it's like $75,000 just to get those mailers that you get. Don't quote me on that price at all. But it's something like that. It's incredibly expensive. And then it's paying for digital ads, paying for ads to show up, on local news stations. So people just can get the name recognition and see what he's for and start learning about it, and drives people to look him up and things like that. So it's not too late to support him just because those digital ads and TV ads are things that we could just like get out there in these next 2 weeks. So get out, vote. Please support my husband. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.